You got plenty of time on your memory? Okay.
Well, we could take it all.
All right. If you need anything, I'm next door. If you need to take a break.
Okay.
You know, this all gets edited a million different ways. So
okay.
It doesn't matter if you need to stop or whatever. All right. Go for it.
Okay. Hi, Mr. Sheets.
Hello there, Liam Jones.
This is my first legacy project for the Remembering Benzie History project. I'm interviewing Jim Sheets, who is a teacher and a coach, and he does all kinds of things still to this day. Sorry, I was supposed to let you introduce yourself.
No, that's fine.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
I am Jim Sheets, and we've been here in Benzie County for 53 and a half years.
And so what is your age and where do you live?
Well, I'm going to let you do the math, but I was born August the 4th in 1937, which puts me at 83, going on the age of 84.
Where do you live?
Where do I live? About 2 blocks to the east of us right now on Orchard Street here in the village of Benzonia.
So what are some of your hobbies or favorite things to do in Benzie County?
Work. I've always enjoyed work, no matter what. What brought me up to this part of the country was I had signed a contract to teach here after graduating from Central Michigan University, and I always worked in the summer when we had off until football practice started in the fall, or summer, late summer, and then
who were your parents and what did they do?
Okay, my parents, Vernon Keith Sheets and Mabel E. Sheets, and they were both from the Blanchard Six Lakes area down in Montcalm and Mecosta, Isabella County area. The three of them, those three counties kind of come together down in that point, and that's where they were from. My dad worked for Taggart Oil, Top Taggart Oil. There's, if you've ever been down to Ferris State University, you'll know that the football field down there is named Taggart Field, and he gave the sum of money for it, and it was built there. But he was quite a renowned driller, and that's who my dad was working for in my early years. At about the age of 4, then we were transferred. He had left Taggart and was working for Consumers, well, it's now Consumers Energy, but it was Consumers Power at that time. And they had their electrical division and they had their gas division. And he worked for the gas division, and they had discovered new fields up in the Marion area, the Marion Township of Osceola County, Winterfield Township of Clare County, and then later on expanded and took in Riverside and Summerfield and some other townships there. But that was in 1941. There were 3 families that transferred up from the Six Lakes field and to Marion, and that's where I went. So from the age of 4 until the age of 17, that's where I lived, was in Marion. My mother had been a school teacher, and then when she later became the office manager of a factory that was in Marion called Riverside Electrical Manufacturing Company, and they were kind of an interesting company. They made the wiring harnesses for a lot of automobiles and appliances like refrigerators, freezers, electrical stoves, dishwashers, dryers, washers, that sort of thing. So, and we settled in, and became quite a part of Marion.
So your family was well known in Marion?
They would have been, yes, they'd have been.
What
It wasn't a very, it isn't a real big town.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to ask about that.
Yeah. In fact, well, we'll get into some other things about your great-grandparents lived there, and your great-grandfather was the, I don't know exactly the title of it, but anyway, he ran the depot there, and because I helped out sometimes at that factory, I would take some things from the factory down to the train depot there. The Ann Arbor ran through Marion, and there used to be quite a bit of what they called railway express, and things were shipped on the trains, and so, yeah.
Whereabouts is Marion?
Marion is in the northeast corner of Osceola County. Almost, if you were to go northeast to southwest, you know where Reed City is.
Yeah.
They would be in a kind of a straight diagonal line up to there, and so they were in a corner bounded by Missaukee County on the north, Wexford. Well, no, I won't say that, but and then Clare County on the east.
Do you have any siblings?
I have a brother. His name is Dan, and he lives in Grand Rapids.
And what does he do for a living?
He is a retired educator as well. He's a teacher. He was in the Grand Rapids system, and I was in the Benzie system. Yeah.
So, could you? And this is going to be very general, but you just take this, whatever. Just tell me what it was like growing up in Marion, or
Okay.
whatever part of your childhood you spent in Benzie.
To be truthful, I'm very, very fortunate to be alive. When I was about 3 years of age, I had what they called infantile paralysis, or what is known now as polio. And that particular summer of 1939, there was quite an epidemic of it in the area, the little area that we lived in down around Six Lakes. And just this past year, one of the girls that was in my Sunday school class in Six Lakes passed away, and she is one that also had polio at that same time. There were quite a few deaths of it in that area, and I can remember one time a few years ago, one of the pastors asked if any of us could remember being baptized, and I said I could. My second one, I don't remember the first one because I was an infant, but when I was 3 years of age, my folks had me baptized again because they didn't think I was going to make it, but I did. And so and I can remember being 4, having my 4th birthday, and I was able to walk, which I was pretty pleased with, because there was a period of time that I couldn't. I had to learn to walk again after being paralyzed. We moved into Marion in 1941, and of course then that fall, December, was Pearl Harbor, and so all sorts of things changed. And here I was in a new town, with no family around other than my parents, and everybody's kind of scared at that time. We're going to forward through then. My childhood then was pretty normal. We owned a farm down near Blanchard, a 100-acre farm down there, and so I always spent time down there in the summer because we raised wheat, and we had a big garden and a lot of raspberries and fruits and things like that. So we did a lot of canning from that particular garden. And of course I was involved in helping as we harvested the wheat. going forward a few more years, when I was 11, I got a paper route. And it was a paper that's no longer published, but it was called the Grand Rapids Herald. And it was an early morning. They had two papers in Grand Rapids, the Press, which was an afternoon paper, and the Herald, which was a morning. And when I got it, I had, let me see, 13 daily customers, and I think it was 16 Sunday customers. And I had that paper out for 2 years, and in the time that I had it, when I finally got rid of it, I had over 160 daily customers, and I had 148 Sunday customers. And I did that all from my bicycle, which was really good when you think of the fact that my legs had been useless when I had polio. And so, and Marion is laid out, it's a mile from the east to the west line, and from the south to the north, it's a mile. So, and I went past each one. I had customers that were outside of the village, and it didn't make any difference if it was summer, spring, winter, or fall, I was on my bicycle. And although there were times in the winter that I couldn't make it on the bicycle, so that was afoot. So I got up pretty early in the morning, got that delivered, and then off to school.
So, oh, sorry.
And then when I was 13, the guy that was the druggist there in Marion, Neil Vanderwalker was his name, and he wondered if I'd like to come to work in the store. Well, I was to do the cleaning of it before school, and then as soon as I turned 14, I was 13 at that time when I started working there. When I turned 14, then I was able to work in the store and wait on customers, and we had a soda fountain and learned how to make the sundaes and the malts and the shakes and all that sort of stuff. Excuse me. And so I had that through the rest of high school. But in the summertime, that was a different story, and a real good friend of mine, Tom Wilson, who's now deceased, he and I hired out to farmers, and we helped them with the hay. And now that was a pretty big business because there were a lot of farmers in that area. It was a heavy agricultural. Excuse me. I might need to take a drink here in a minute. But anyway, we would work on, and most of them had 3 cuttings of hay. And so that was, most of them were square bales. That's what we worked with. And the bales varied. Some of them were as light as 60 pounds, and some of them were 125 pounders. And those were those were really something to try and hoist, because you put them up about 7 high on a wagon. And then once you got them on there, then you took them to the barn, and then you had to mow them away. So most of the farmers had elevators that took them up, dumped them in there, and then you were up in the hay mow putting them away. So
so this was all...
That was summer work, yeah.
Okay, and
Yeah.
this was in the...
My teenage years, yeah.
So, like the late 40s then?
This would have been in, the late 40s and early 50s, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So with World War II, you mentioned something about Pearl Harbor
Yeah.
having an effect, sort of, on your...
Oh, yeah, because everybody in neighbors and people that you knew were getting drafted, and some were enlisting. And as I said, when we moved to Marion, there were 3 families that came up together at the time from the Six Lakes field. And the draft board said, now, this is an essential, very essential occupation here, very necessity, quite a necessity for the war effort, because it was the natural gas that was in the ground there that they were pumping out and sending out. And so it was going to to Detroit and to Chicago and places like that. So they told the guys, there are 3 of you, they're all about the same age, same number of dependents, and so you figure it out who's going to, one of you is going to be drafted, and 2 of you will stay and run the field. So they drew straws, and the one guy, Ike Altman, got the short straw, so he got drafted and went to the Navy, and my dad and another guy named Jim Ralston, they stayed and worked the field. And there were times that we would see my dad for maybe a week at a time because we had some really, really heavy snows during the early 40s. And the snow plows that they had at that time were kind of iffy at times, and sometimes they'd be snowed in out there, so they'd have to go and work the field by foot with snowshoes. They had snowshoes that they used, and to take care of that.
So you mentioned you worked a lot.
Yeah.
I have heard that you played, or at least participated in several sports.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Which ones did you do?
In high school, I played football, baseball, track, and basketball.
Okay. So, which one of those was your favorite?
Well, it'd been a toss-up between football and baseball, but I loved baseball for the kids. We had our own little fields that we had, different places that we'd play. And we'd have, if we had 5 people show up, if we had 6 people show up, we had our own rules in for where you had to hit the ball, where you couldn't hit the ball. But we played a lot of baseball. That was something that we did. And, we'd have a ball, and a new ball was something, we might get one every couple of years, truthfully. And our bats, if we broke one or cracked one, then we'd glue them and put nails in them and then wrap them with tape, and we'd use them. But it was kind of funny, yeah. My brother and I growing up, we did a lot of farm work. And we belonged to my dad 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. Saturday, we belonged to my mother. And we learned how to cook, we learned how to bake, we learned how to dust, we learned how to run a dust mop and a vacuum and, everything, and cleaning sinks and toilet bowls and everything that went along with that, we learned, which was okay because both my brother and I had some years of bachelorhood, and so that stood us in very good stead then.
So, what was it like going to school in Marion?
Well, at that time we lived in town when I was in high school, so I didn't have to travel by bus. And it was just, I don't know, yeah. Everybody had pretty much the same values. We all were poor, we just didn't know it because everybody else was the same way, same condition. During the war particularly, there were no goods to be bought. I mean, everything was rationed. You had these booklets that had the ration stamps in them, or they had these little tokens, and I have some of those that I still have that I used when I was teaching to show people what they were. And you couldn't buy, for example, you couldn't buy sugar unless you had the ration stamps. You couldn't buy meat unless you had the ration stamp. So if you raised your own, of course, you were in good shape, and that's what we did. We always had animals that we raised. We had a big garden, and we did a lot of canning. So, but gasoline was rationed. Tires were like non-existent. I mean, there was let's see, 35 mile per hour limit nationwide. That's it. So I imagine you've driven much faster than 35 miles an hour. Well, you didn't, and really you didn't dare because your tires were so bad. They had tubes in them, and they had patches on the tubes, and then patches on top of the patches. and you, if it broke down, you stopped and jacked up the car or pickup, whatever you had, took the wheel off, broke it down, took the tube out, put another patch on it, and off you went. So a lot of the roads that we now drive on that are paved were dirt and gravel roads. So
we're going to move on from your childhood now.
Okay.
And onto what you did after you graduated. What did you do after you
okay, I graduated, I was 17 years of age, and I was the second youngest kid in my graduating class. And after graduation, as I said, I was 17, and I wouldn't turn 18 until August. And I started right out working for some of the farmers, and then I hired in called Raymond Concrete and Pile Company, and they were building a new compressor plant out at what was called Church Bridge, which was in just east of Marion, and there was this huge. They brought the consumers, and Panhandle Eastern had formed a company called Michigan Gas Storage, which is a subsidiary of both of them. And they brought the natural gas in from Texas and Oklahoma, and it was a 36-inch pipeline. And they brought it in, they compressed it and put it back down in the ground, because where the natural gas had been there originally, and they shipped it out. Now they found, well, this can hold it as a storage. Just like putting things in a closet, we just put it down into the underground caverns, and during the summer and then the winter they send it out to the transmission, smaller lines. And anyway, that's what I worked on, and I worked with drive one of these little carts that had a bucket on the front that had the concrete, and we'd mix it and then go and dump it in. And when that job finished, then I went up, and Raven Concrete Pile was also working. They had a big project up at St. Ignace in Mackinac City called the Mackinac Bridge, which was being built at that particular time. And so I went up there and worked on that for a short time. And then I had decided, my mother wanted me to become a doctor. My dad said, you do whatever you want to do. So I said, I think I'll go to School of Pharmacy. So I went down to Ferris College, or at that time it was called Ferris Institute. And there were about 1,000 students there, and I enrolled in the College of Pharmacy. And at the end of 1 year, I thought I knew everything there was to know in the world, like a lot of 18-year-old kids. And so I decided that I looked around and thought, these are the same people I'm going to be in classes with for the next 4 or 5 years. I don't think so. So I left Ferris. And on the 6th of July, Ron Wilson, a brother of this Tom that I said, Ron and Tom were my really, really good friends in high school. And Ron and I went down to Dow Chemical in Midland, and we made application and took all the tests and everything, and we got hired in. Ron was just a brilliant, brilliant person. I've only met maybe 2 in my lifetime, people that had a photographic memory. But you'd ask him a question, and he'd say, in Bob Burns' book, on page 672 it says this, and he'd give that, and he'd give it to you verbatim, the word for word for what was on that page. It was unbelievable. You know, he passed away this past year of cancer. Anyway. So anyway, he and I were down there. Some of our fellow students had already been down in Midland, and that's who they said, maybe you ought to think about going to work for Dow. So, okay, so we did. We went down there, and his aunt and uncle lived in Bridgeport, which was down between Midland and Saginaw. And we stayed there for a couple of weeks until we found a place to live. And so eventually there were, I think, 4 of us from Midland that lived there, or from Marion that lived there. And we had a house on Bay City Road. So I was there. I hired in on the 6th of July in 1956. And then in January of 1958, I went into the Army. And so at that time that we were having a little bit of a depression, and I could see that people were getting laid off at the plant, and like almost every boy that graduated with me in high school went into the service. It was just something you did. I mean, we didn't think consciously of it or anything. We did it. And so Ron was, Wilson, he also went in. He went in before I did. And he was in the first class of the Special Forces. And his strength was languages. They sent him out to Presidio, Monterey, and he learned Mandarin Chinese. And we didn't hear from him. We never knew what happened. You know, where he went, where he just kind of lost. Everybody lost contact of him for a year or more, and he never spoke about it. I don't think he was supposed to. I don't know. We never knew what he did. But anyway. So he was able to put his intelligence to good use. So
this is 1958.
1958, January 1958. Just had celebrated that. It was the 22nd of January that I went in. And that was kind of an interesting time, too.
Yeah.
Now, there's two epidemics that I have survived. And now we're in a third one. But the first one was the polio epidemic. And that I did survive that in 1958. And it was called Asia flu, or I think Hong Kong flu, or whatever. And it really hit us. We were at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. And people were really getting sick. And we'd try to make it to the morning duty roster, because if we fell below a certain number, then we would have to be recycled. We'd have to go through this all over again. And none of us wanted that. I mean, Fort Leonard Wood was not the garden spot of the earth, let me tell you. It was bad. But one morning, this would have been in February, probably right about this time of February, the meat wagons pulled in next to us. Now, we had some guys that went on sick call, but down there, we were in Company A. Company B and Company C lost between them 7 guys overnight. All of a sudden, we thought, well, maybe this isn't so bad to get recycled if we do. When I talk about recycle, I mean you'd have to go back and start your training all over again, because you went through with a large group every time you did. So then, you start thinking, those are your friends. These are the guys you've been training with, and they're dead. They're gone. So it was not a very good flu then either. So now there's another. Now I'm hoping to survive the one that we're going through right now too, of course.
They can't catch you.
I don't know. So, what's next?
So, when did you return home?
Okay, then I got back in 1960, and while I'd been in the service, I had been fortunate enough to take some classes. Sometimes I'd been close enough to a university that I could take some classes or whatever, but I decided that I was going to go back to school when I got out of the service. And so I did. I got back. Seemed like I got back on a Tuesday. On Wednesday, I went down to Dow to see about returning to work. And on Friday, I talked to a friend of mine to go down who was attending Central Michigan University. And I talked this person into going down with me and helping me go through the procedures, which I did, and I signed up for some classes. And so on Saturday, I attended my my classes on Saturday at Central, and on Monday I started working at Dow. So then for the next number of years, I worked full-time, and after that first semester, I went to school full-time. So for the most part, I was able to work the afternoon shift at Dow, which was from 4 to midnight. And then I had classes. Sometimes I had labs that started at 7 o'clock in the morning, but I had a lot of early classes because trying to get them through the day so then I could get ready to go to work. And so that's what I did for quite a few years. Got my graduated with my bachelor's degree, and I was working on my master's. And then I was involved in a very, very bad automobile accident. And again, January. January was never a real great month for me, I guess. On the 7th of January, 1966, I was in an automobile accident on M20 between Midland and Mount Pleasant, in which 4 people were killed. There were 3 nuns in a car. They were from Rosebush. There was a Catholic school there, a grade school, and they were the teaching staff of the St. Henry's, I think it was called. Anyway, they pulled out around a snowplow to pass, and here we were in the lane. It was a 2-lane highway, and we hit head on. The 3 of the nuns were killed, and the driver of our car was killed. I was directly behind the driver in that seat, and it was a 63 Chevrolet. It didn't have seat belts in it. And I went up, hit the roof, and I fractured my neck. And so that kind of brought things to a halt. So that was 66, and the next year, 67, I started interviewing for teaching jobs. So
what was your bachelor's degree in?
It's a Bachelor of Science. I had 3 majors. Social studies major, history major, and a biology major.
So you were looking for these teaching opportunities?
Yes, we wanted to get back up north. Being on the east side of the state, I was raised in kind of the central to western part of the state. And then living and working for a number of years in the eastern part of the state, there's quite a bit of difference. Really is. And so we wanted to get back into either the central or northern part of the state. By this time, Meryl and I had been married. We were married in August of 1961. We had two small children, and so I had 3 interviews and had job offers for 3 different places. One was at Harbor Springs, one was at East Jordan, and the third one was here at Benzie Central.
How did you meet your spouse?
Well, when my optometrist was in Cadillac, and one of the things I wanted to get contacts, because I'd gone with glasses for many years, and I wanted to get contacts, and I went up there, and she was working for the optometrist, Marilyn was. And anyway, we started talking, and we seemed to, so we had some dates and so on, and
Romance ensued.
and so on this particular date right here, which is Valentine's Day, 60 years ago, I asked her to marry me. And
I didn't know that.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
cool.
yeah.
So it's not your anniversary, but it's your
No,
the anniversary.
anniversary of our engagement. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, today.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
On that.
So anyway, I had those three job offers, and my uncle's cousin was the superintendent up at Harbor Springs, and he said, after he says, you know, Jim, he said, I don't think you'll be real happy up here. He said, Harbor Springs is kind of a place that, well, it's kind of a status place, and they don't really like teachers very much up here. And so I said, okay, thanks, Bill, and we scratched that off the list. And the other guy, at East Jordan, the superintendent there, had said that they were having some internal problems. They had consolidated and then voted to deconsolidate, and so there were some problems going on there. And he was a friend. His father had been the football coach at Marion when I was down in elementary school, so I knew the family. Played baseball for his brother, who was our manager of our independent team down there. And anyway, that I come up here. My brother and my dad and I were going to go fishing up in the UP, and so I came up here, and I really wasn't dressed for an interview. But Bob Lone was the superintendent at that time, and we hit it off, and he offered me a contract, and Merrill and I were ready to sign right then, but he said, well, why don't you think about it over the weekend, because it was Memorial Day weekend, and let him know next week. And we then started looking for a house. And you know part of the story, we eventually found a house on Orchard Street, the one we still live in, and it was owned by your great-grandparents, Jim and Ardith Jones. And so we bought it on a land contract, and we've lived there 53 and a half years.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it is. It's funny how lives intersperse. You know, you don't think of those, but there are things that come back and not haunt you, but you pick up that part of your life, and on you go, and it weaves into this and weaves into that. Yeah. So.
Somebody told me once, like it's like a ripple effect
Mm-hmm.
that like everybody has
Mm-hmm.
on other people in their
Yeah.
lives.
Yeah. And you never know when those rings are going to affect you, or they're going to touch you, and yeah.
So what year was this?
When I came up here,
Yeah.
we came here on the 13th of August, 1967. We moved into the house over there.
60s.
Yeah.
So what was it like being a teacher in the 60s?
Whoa! It was different. Now I can imagine it would have been tougher on the younger ones. like I had turned 30 on the 4th of August. We moved here on the 13th of August. So I was 30 years of age when I started teaching. And it was, the Vietnam War was really going on. And I was, to be honestly truthful, Marilyn and I we kind of figured that I was going to get called back into the service. Because I had the MOS that I carried, which is your military occupational status, was one that I figured that I would get called back. And but for some reason or not, I wasn't. But it was a time people were really, really questioning things. And there was the controversy over Vietnam. I lost quite a number of friends over in Vietnam.
Did that happen often?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Where people would fight in Korea and then they would be called back to...
Oh yeah, there were... there were quite a number of people that I knew. In fact, when I was working on that for Raymond Concrete Pile in the compressor plant out on the Muskegon River that I was telling you about, later on I started working for a guy. I was the welder's helper for him, and the welder was going to dental school at that time, and he had been in World War II and then got called back into Korea. He was a Marine, and he got shot up both places. And
so you came here and you got a job.
Had the job.
What subject did you teach?
Let's see, in the first year that I was here, I taught U.S. history and world history, both.
So, oh, sorry,
Yeah.
I was talking. Nothing. So what about that subject or teaching in general inspired you to make a career out of it?
Well, when we talk about the ripple effect, like you're talking about, there are people that touch your life, and it isn't like they hit you like a sledgehammer or anything like that, but they have an impact on you. It may be from afar, it may be that it's somebody you look at and you say, now that's the life that I'd kind of like to live. Or it's somebody that takes you under their wing and they help you. Some years ago, a few years back, there was a book, and I think it was written by Hillary Clinton, that said it takes a village to raise a child. And it's the truth. I mean, there's, other than your parents, your grandparents, cousins, nieces, nephews, whatever it is, there are people that have an influence on you. And I think there was a fellow by the name of Ralph McCrimmon that was a history teacher that I had. And I admired that man. And there was also a guy, I worked with him at the drugstore in Marion, then I later on worked for him. He was the undertaker in town. Howard B. Fosnaught was his name. And he just was one of those people that he was always doing things for other people. And he was, when I was 16, I started working for him, because at that time there was no EMS service, no ambulance service. Undertakers were called if there was an accident or somebody having a heart attack or something, and that was it. And I'd be a driver for him possibly, or maybe even sometimes I helped with people, basic first aid. That's all we could do was basic first aid for people. And we transported them to the hospital, and then I worked with him at the funerals and things. But anyway, he was somebody that was really, really a very strong mentor to me. And most of the people, a lot of the farmers that I worked with, when you're exposed to many people, you pick this, you don't even realize it, but you pick out a particular characteristic of somebody, and you say, you kind of add it to yourself. And I don't know why, but I mean, that's just the way it works. And when I worked at Dow, now another thing, Howard was on the school board, was on there for many, many, many years. And that was in my brain a little bit. And this Neil Vanderwalker, who was the pharmacist that owned the drugstore, his wife was also on the school board, Novia Vanderwalker. When I went to work at Dow, my boss in the lab that I worked at was Everett N. Luce, E.N. Luce. He was the president of the Midland Public School Board. He was president of the State Association of School Board, and he was president of the National Association of School Boards. He was a really neat guy, and he helped me out a lot in trying to get a schedule set up so that I could go to school and work and get my hours in and everything and get the work done for them that they needed. And I had somewhere buried back in my brain said, someday you're going to be in the school board. And later on, after I retired from teaching in 1995, and in 2000 I ran for the school board, and I was on there for 8.5 years. So that part of me was fulfilled then, yeah. But it's amazing how many people, affect you. And when we were talking about the Vietnam situation, there was my best friend that I had when I was in the Army was a fellow by the name of McKinnon, Mac McKinnon. He was from Chicago. He was a black man, and we just hit it off, and we were really, really good friends. But it was with him that I experienced what racial injustice was and what discrimination really was. Because we both had qualified as expert riflemen on all sorts of weapons. And as a result, we got a weekend pass. And so we went to, somebody's going to come in, Chicago. Or no, excuse me, to St. Louis. And when we got there, Mac had said, now, Jim, he said, you and I aren't going to be able to go to the same places. And I did think of St. Louis as being a really racially desegregated city, but it was. And he said, I won't be able to go with you. So I said, well, can I go with you? And he said, yeah, you can go with me. So we went to what were called black and tan clubs. But that was my first real brush with discrimination. And then when we were in, later on, we were in the Deep South, and then you really, really discovered it was whites only and colored. Whites, colored. That was the thing. And that shaped me too, I'll tell you. I couldn't understand, because I had been raised in my family was pretty much colorblind. My grandparents the same way, and so it had an effect on me. So, okay, now we're back into the 60s, and we'll go back there. And that was, the one thing I can remember is that, boy, that Meryl and I had to use up a lot of our savings, because I was making good money working at Dow. I mean, I was making good money, and I signed a contract. My first contract here was for like, I think $5,200 a year for the year, $5,200 a year, and they gave me credit for couple of steps on the military because I'd been in the military, so there were like a 10 steps. So I was up above the beginning teacher. I was given several steps. Plus I coached varsity baseball, JV football, and I was the junior class advisor. And that was all included. So, you know, it was quite a difference in trying to get by. But we did. We did.
So, those people that you mentioned had an impact on you, specifically on your decision to become a teacher. Did any of the things that, like you said, you picked up from them sort of bleed through in your teachings? Like, is there anything that you picked up from them that you wanted all of your students to know, or all of your students to have in the toolbox?
I think that the biggest thing that I could say, and when I was first here, my first year, in Bill Lynch, who was the Hall of Fame basketball coach from Benzie, he and I were coaching JV football together. And our philosophies were so very similar. And we kind of made an agreement, a pact among us, that we would always treat every kid as if they were our own. And I think that reinforced that was some of the characteristics of my mentors, was they took everybody at face value. And that, unconsciously or consciously, that's what I tried to do, was to treat everybody the same.
Unconditional love.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Well,
yeah. Boy, girl, otherwise, whatever. Skin coloration, religious background, whatever. Didn't make any difference. Treat everybody the best you possibly could.
So, I'm excited to ask you about this. But I know that you had your daughter in class at one point. So just explain to me what it's like to teach somebody. Like, is there a difference between teaching somebody who's related to you and somebody who's not related to you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You're tougher on them. You're tougher on them.
Okay.
Yeah, you are. Because you know, it's a tough thing being a teacher's kid, as you know. There's only one thing worse, I think, and that's a preacher's kid. Because they're, your dad's a preacher, you got to be this, No. You got to be just like everybody else. But it is, you hold them to a higher standard. And I was fortunate enough to be able to coach my son in football. I mean, I had him in class, and we didn't really have any problems there, but in the football field, he was the first. We'd only had a junior high football program prior to when he became, then they brought the 7th grade over, so then we had separate 7th grade, 8th grade teams.
So, okay. So I wanted to ask you this. I actually added this in
Okay.
like right before the interview started because I thought it was interesting. But Mr. McLaren mentioned something about male versus female teachers
Mm-hmm.
back when you had probably in the beginning of your career, and he said you were very outgoing and different from most male teachers. Like, just explain to me in more detail about what that's like, because I really don't haven't experienced anything like that.
I think probably was the fact that compared to most people, I'd had a lot of varied experiences. I've never had a job that I disliked. Never had. There's a couple of jobs that I wouldn't go back to and do again, but I never had anything that I disliked. Just like everything, whatever it is, make the most of it. Enjoy it. Get your enjoyment out of it and go on, move on to something else. And I was fortunate here to not only, when I became part of this community, every summer I did something, tried to do something different. And so I got to know where you lived, where that person lived, where this person lived, because I was out in the community, whether working or whatever it was, and I knew almost where every kid that I had in class lived, or every kid that I came in contact with, where they lived. I got to know their parents. I just thought that was part of the job. Yeah.
And I think it's good that you did that. But I'm just imagining, like, I heard that you put your phone number on the board.
Yeah, that's true. Before Halloween, and there used to be some pretty lively things that happened around this area on Halloween. There were some towns honor that you didn't go through, and your dad lived in Honor for a while, so he could tell you this. But they used to burn tires in the middle of town and things like that. But yes, I would. I'd put my phone number on, and I'd say, okay, if you get in trouble, and it's bad enough that you don't want to call your folks, you can call me, and I'll come and bail you out. I said, the only thing is I put a limit of 50 miles on it. I only go out 50 miles to do that. But I broke that one time because I had to go to Ludington and bail somebody out. But yeah, I did. And everybody paid me back. Now there was one that I never thought I was going to see, and all of a sudden one day we're at football practice, and somebody came trudging across the field real slow with their head down and coming up to me, and then I recognized who it was, and I yelled out his name, and he came on over, and he paid me the bail money. I thought that was just gone. I didn't, I don't remember what it was, a couple $100 maybe, something like that. But anyway, it was a year later, and but I got it back. So anyway, yes, I did.
I'm imagining what would happen if a teacher put their phone number up nowadays.
I don't know.
I don't know. It would, because even at Benzie, there have been actual stalkers.
Oh yeah.
Before, some of the younger teachers. So I don't know.
There's some. There were things that occurred. I chose not to make a big point of things in a classroom, but that person and I would have a talk, and we would get it ironed out. Myself, there was, and I never feared anyone. There was only, I take it back, there was one kid that I feared. He had so much rage built up in him that it was just, you couldn't reach him. You just couldn't reach him at all. And you knew that he was going to end up in the penitentiary, and he did. And I don't know if he's still alive or not, but he just had so much hatred and so much rage bottled up, and you never knew what it was going to do. The other thing, and I think that this helped me to make my transition, and maybe it made me a little more accessible, was that in all the years that I was here, there was only one semester that I didn't have lunchroom duty. So that out of 56 semesters, 55 of them I had lunchroom duty. And in the lunchroom duty, you got to talk to everybody. And these people that were being a little bit, acting a little goofy, doing some things that they shouldn't have been, you could go and talk to them there, and you weren't calling them down in front of everybody, you weren't making an example out of them, but you could, so.
What is one thing you think all teachers should have?
One sin?
Thing, like
Oh.
personality-wise.
I think it can be summed up in one word of empathy. Empathy. Yeah.
Writing that down.
Okay. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Were any of your students very successful?
Oh gosh. Oh. Benzie has been blessed with people that have gone on and really done things for their lives and done things for other people, that have these characteristics. We've had.
How did teaching high schoolers impact the community they belong to?
Take a look around. See how many own businesses in this area. See how many are in the medical field in this area. How many are just good, solid citizens? Nothing spectacular, but they have a job, they provide for their families. They're not out running a bunch of chemicals through their system or anything like that. And just being very good people, that's all. Just good people. You take a look in local government. How many people are serving in the Board of Commissioners that are graduates of our local schools, either Benzie or Frankfurt, Alberta. How many are in township government? How many of them are people that have come back to teach in our school systems? So, yeah, I think that. And we've had just used to go down through the yearbooks and take a look at how many were doctors or dentists or attorneys or teachers or whatever, I think in my daughter, Beth, in her class, the class of 1982, I trying to think there are just something like 18 or 19 people out of that class that have the ability to call themselves doctor. Whether it be a medical doctor, a dentist, optometrist, or Will Lynch, who's a professor of physics, teaches at a college down in Georgia, but that have their doctorates in one way or another. There's that many. That's big, big chunk.
So, would you say that that's the thing you always tried to do, is just make all of your students, in simplest terms, good people in general?
Yeah. I think you try to be a good role model. And you never know what clicks and what doesn't, There's some that you think that you never got to them, but then later on you find you did. You made an impact on them one way or another. And I always think about I know I'm not going to use that one. I'll forget about it. But another thing, I worked for 6 years over at Interlochen State Park as a park ranger, an 03 park ranger, when I was the night patrolman. Now, Interlochen is the largest state park in the state of Michigan, 551 campsites. And I'll tell you, on weekends, you had a small city, and I was the only patrolman. And so there would be things that would occur, and because you've got that many people into a relatively small area, and they want to enjoy themselves. There's nothing wrong with that. But you have to try and get them to understand that it's for the common good. You gotta treat your neighbor all right. And I think some of those experiences, coupled with my teaching, they kind of one and the same. You're trying to treat everybody equal, so that everybody can enjoy themselves. Yeah.
So we're going to move on to coaching.
Okay.
Now, you might not consider yourself to be a famous coach, but to me, you are a pretty famous coach at Benzie.
Mm-hmm.
You have coached me, and
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of people that I know have been coached by you. Which sports did you help out with?
Here, I coached football, both JV and varsity, and then baseball for about 22, 23 years. And I coached track and still keep my hand in track with the throwing events. I enjoy that. I enjoy the body mechanics involved in that. And, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. So what is your favorite memory that you have from coaching? Or what is your favorite point that you've helped out with?
I think going back is that the first time that we made the playoffs. And that was when, back in those particular days, in the beginning of the playoffs, it was only 4 teams. 4 teams out of 4 classes made the playoffs. There were only 16 teams in the entire state made the playoffs. That's what it was. You could have a perfect record and not get in. Then it was expanded to 16 per class. And there were only 4 classes again. And that's where we did. And that was, it would have been the fall of 89, fall of 89. We had a tremendous ball club. We didn't score a lot of points, but we held them scoreless. We only gave up 2 touchdowns in the regular season.
Wow.
Yeah. And one of those was on a fake field goal, which was an illegal fake field goal by St. Francis. Of course. I knew you'd say that. Big Rapids scored 6 points against us, and St. Francis scored 7 against us. And that was it. And the rest was shutouts. I mean, yeah, it was shutouts.
Wow.
That was it. That was an unusual group of kids that they just... We had lost in that summer, we had lost one of the members of that team. He was involved in an accident out on 115. He was coming back from getting his physical in Frankfurt, and he was kind of part of the inspiration for the other kids. And I was the offensive and defensive line coach, okay? And I would have to finally just call a halt to the drills, because I had kids, they would work on technique and work on our 3-on-3 and 2-on-1 and 1-on-3, whatever it was, drills. They work on them forever. They just thrived on it. And oh gosh, it was a joy to watch them, because they were special. They were really special. Yeah. But I have to tell you that we only had 4 paid coaches for our entire system. We didn't have, we didn't have junior high football. We had freshmen, JV, and varsity. And so Bill Lynch had the freshmen, and then he usually would go out and hire somebody to help him. I had the JV and the varsity, offense and defense, line, and Henry Crooks worked for me, or I hired him, and I paid him out of my salary, which wasn't very much, to work with me. And then there was Tom Stapleton, Sr., and Peter Moss were on the varsity. They were the 2 paid there. So I would work with them, and then Thursday night I would take the JVs and we'd go off and play our games, and then Friday night was the varsity. So we were really busy in those years with a very short staff, but we had some really good teams, real good teams, yeah. And unfortunately, the way the rules were at that time, we didn't always make the playoffs. But in those years, in '89 and 91, we won the conference 3 years in a row, and that was a tough conference. Big Rapids, Reed City, Chip Hills, Cadillac, St. Francis, Benzie. Did I say Reed City? Yeah, I did say Reed City. Yeah. It was a very good conference. Tough. I mean, they were all A and B schools, and the parochials, of course, St. Francis, and us.
Do you feel that sports had an impact on your community, or?
Oh yeah. Oh yes, it does. Yeah. Yeah. If you would have been here during the 70s, Bill Lynch had some fantastic basketball teams, and St. Francis did. If the game started, the JV game started at 6:30, you better be in line at 5 o'clock or you weren't going to get in the gym. I'm serious. It was just people hanging from the rafters. It was, there were some classics. They had some great teams. We had some great teams. Yeah, and the community really supported them. Same thing with football, and of course we had some great track. We had some good baseball teams. We had some good athletics going on at that time. But we had great support, and that was when, like today, we got in the mail, or not yesterday we got in the mail that John Rigler, you know the Riglers, and he's celebrating his 90th birthday very soon. And so they're asking for cards. Well, John was real strong in the Boosters Club, and that big rock that's there in the football field, you know where it's at? Yeah. And the names are on there of people who were very instrumental in the Boosters Club, and John, of course, is on that. But yeah, we built houses. We did all sorts of things. It's unbelievable the things that they did. We auctioned off automobiles. It was really something, you know, that people supported.
Wow. I'm looking at the questions because you answer very thoroughly. So it's like I'll ask you one question and then like 4 underneath it I can just skip because you
okay. All right.
Do you still coach or help out with anything?
Yes, in fact, this last spring, I was going to work with the throwers at the junior high level, particularly every day. Shane Iverson, you know Shane? Yeah. Well, sure you know Shane. What am I saying? Anyway, he was, you know, he works for the junior high program, so he came and asked me if I would. And then, of course, that disappeared because there was no school. So, and I was kind of looking forward to that. Like, I'd like to get. I had worked with kids, younger kids like that before, and some of them, of course, they brought on up through, and we had some kids that set the state or set our school records. And I was always kind of proud of that. Yeah. Right. The only thing I could never get the discus. I never could get a boy that could match Mark Welch's throw. He had a perfect time. The wind was just right, and he got a great release, and he got that frisbee out there a long ways. But, huh?
What was his name?
Mark Welch.
Did he, how successful was he with discus?
He holds the school record. And it's, you'll look up on the board and you'll see it up there, yeah. And that was back, gosh sakes, early 80s probably. Yeah, it would have been, yeah. Yeah.
How far could he throw?
I think it's 158 maybe, something like that. Pretty good toss. Yeah.
Oh.
I had a kid that we went to state several times, but he never should have been because Larry Bushman was his name, and he was about 5'6", and arms that were only about this long, but he was powerful, and he had this quick spin, really good spin. And he got 140s. I mean, always 140s. But we could, because he held our bench press record and leg press record for many years.
Oh, all that, yeah.
Yeah, but it's just that he was able to get that centrifugal spin, and then put it into linear. And
So community work. This is mostly going to be nowadays.
okay.
Are you involved in any volunteer work or
Oh, yeah.
organizations today?
Let me go back a ways here, and there's some things that I'm kind of pleased with and proud of that I did. I retired from teaching in 1995, and immediately after I retired, I started working on getting my realtor license. And so I did all that education, and I started into that. In the next year, 96, I was approached and asked if I would run for supervisor for Benzonia Township, which I did, and I found that to be really, really an interesting job. And so I held that job for 20 years. Because of my involvement with the township, other things, I was asked, well, how would you like to serve on this committee, or how would you like to serve on that committee, and so on and such. And I ended up doing that for quite a number of years. One of the things that I'm really, really proud of was the Solid Waste Committee. The Solid Waste Advisory Committee, I think, was the real name for it, like that. And a fellow by the name of Harlan Reichel, who was from Lake Township, and he and I served as the co-chair of this. And we were trying to figure out how we could recycle more of our waste. And so we worked on this, and we contacted various peoples, and a lot of communication going on with waste haulers and things. And the upshot of it was that we started to make some progress, but we set some goals. And in fact, it was by 2020, which the year just finished, we wanted to have, I think we wished to have 15% of the trash, paper, plastic, glass, metals, and things in the county recycled. And I think you'll find that somewhere around 38% was recycled last year. And that's how it's grown. And you know what it's like with the cardboard out there at the high school in the semi. I mean, it's been a great thing. And you think of that, all that was going into landfills, and now it's being recycled and used again. It's just wonderful. So that was something. And I was on that committee for, I don't know, maybe 5 years that we worked on it, and then it kind of took off, and it's something that's going, and it's expanded. Now we have hazard waste, and we get rid of this, and we get rid of that. I mean, it's grown. It's really, really been beneficial, and I'm kind of proud of that one. Another one that I'm proud of is the Benzie County Parks and Recreation Commission. And I was on that for 13 years. And the late Charlie Kerr, Dr. Charlie Kerr, who was the dentist down in Beulah, and he and I kind of went back and forth being president and vice president. And as I said, I was on that for 13 years. And in all of the stuff that went into trying to get a boat launch on Crystal Lake, and the trails, the trails down there on that runs between Beulah and, well, actually Thompsonville and Frankfort, Alberta. We did a lot of things. There were a lot of things that came across the Parks and Rec when I was a member of that, and I feel really proud about that. The lighthouse out at Point Betsy, and the trail, and the all of this that went into that, and the various acquisitions of land. Yeah, so those were things that I was very proud of. This particular right here, the library, yeah, Mills Community House. The library, of course, was owned by the church, It was part of the legacy of the church, of the Congregational Church across the road here. And I was the chair of the trustees in the 70s. And so then I was put on the board for the community house, and I was the treasurer, and we had Cecily Williams. You probably have heard of her name. And she was very generous in giving gifts of money, stock and money to and so that was kind of put into a fund, and then all the work that's been gone into the building here. And it's what a treasure this place is, you know. So that's just something that happened, you know, nothing that I reached out to, but it was just I happened to be a part of it, and so it's always had a place in my heart about that. And then, as I said, I served for 8.5 years on the Board of Education, on the school board, and I was in all of the offices there, and that was a very interesting time. Very, very interesting time.
I heard you helped with the fire department. Is that true?
Well, the thing is that as the supervisor, you're kind of, yes, you have a lot of closeness with the fire department. And I still serve as a trustee on the Benzonia Township Board. And so we make decisions. Right now, we're purchasing a new truck. And that is expensive. A fire truck is one of those things, you know, you're looking at something that's about an $800,000 machine. That's a lot of money. A lot of money. Yeah.
I was looking at my notes, and I heard the number, but I kind of brushed it off, and then I realized what number you said.
Yeah.
So, so just to, we're very, very close to the end.
Okay.
Just in general, what are your hopes and dreams for the future of Benzie County, or the people of Benzie County?
Well, there are hopes that I have. I think that with the pandemic that has gone on, we have found that there are people who are able to successfully work from home. But one of the things that we need in Benzie County is broadband.
What is that?
For internet use. Okay. You probably have dial-up down where you're at, don't you? Or do you have where do you have it? Who do you have it through? Do you have the internet? Yeah, you do. Do you know who you have it through? Who's the carrier?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, most of the county does, or much of the county does not have it.
Okay.
And that's one of the things it needs, because if people had that, there's a lot of people that would be moving here and working from home. But that brings up another problem that we have. We do not have adequate housing. It's tough to find housing. The rentals are just about non-existent. But we have to find some way of getting affordable housing. And it works on our workforce. You know, people, they can't live here because there's no place to live. You know, and you're not going to live out of your car. We have too much of that already, as you know. You know how many kids are surfing, right? Yeah. So that's, but I think that this has proven to us that people can, if they have the infrastructure, and one of the, it would be the broadband, that they'll probably be moving to Benzie County. So I anticipate and we see in our the building permits that are coming in that people are building more and more in here. Just even in our township, I think we had 50-some permits last year in 2020 for building here in Benzonia Township. So I think that by doing this, we're going to attract possibly people who will add to the community. And that's what you're always looking for, good people. You know, people that want to live here, want to be part of the community and be involved.
Okay, we're in the conclusion. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you would like to talk about?
Yeah. The one thing that I would like to add is I would like to thank the people of Benzie County who have been good to us. I mean, we've had our problems, and I feel that we have been supported very much, and I'm very appreciative of the support that we've received from this community. Yeah.
Is there anything you want to ask me?
When you leave this community and go on, and as you find that your life's work and what you want to do, and hopefully you'll be successful at it, I know you'll be successful at it, what kind of a community, what size community would you like to live in?
What size?
Yeah, I mean, are you looking to go to a metropolitan area? Are you looking to go, what are you thinking about?
Well, I'm pretty fortunate. Well, I am fortunate. I kind of stopped the sentence in the middle. What I meant to say is I've seen quite a bit of like metropolitan, like you said, and I've lived here since I was 3. So I do know benefits from both. It is possible that the job I want to do would require me to live in a more urban environment, but a place like this seems such more such a more connected place, like just familiar, I guess. And it's just it seems more fun, to be honest. I mean, there's a lot of work opportunities in cities and bigger places like that, but here it's just you get to find out a lot of things about yourself and about people you know through, you know, actually doing things with people, I guess. Like this.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, going out to eat with people and talking with people. So any place where I get to be able to get to know people and make an impact.
Yeah.
So a place like this would probably be the easiest place to do something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. Is there anything else?
No, that's about it.
Well, Mr. Sheets, thank you very, very much for doing this for me. You're helping me so much with the project. You're helping your community once again. You did great, and you did very, very good.
Okay, thank you.
The date is February 14th. This is my first legacy project interview for the Remembering Benzie History Project.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank goodness that it's 2021 and we can put 2020 out of our mind and like it didn't exist, okay?
Yeah.
All right.